Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Matt here with another game update on Nightshaders, my personal project that I'm doing on the side. I'm a professional game developer by day and I love it so much, I do it in my free time too. The big push this month was on our school tile set. So I'm going to take you through how I made all the art for that and how I put that together. I'm also going to cover some cool stuff I did with weapons and some pretty big changes I did to the game flow. It's going to be fun, so stick around, and if you want to follow the project, don't forget to subscribe down below, and let's get into the video. All right, let's make some props for my game. I'm going to make a computer and a monitor for the school tile set. With this prop, I'm starting off really old school, just with a box, and I'm going to just continue to refine it from there. I like to first sort of rough in the larger shapes with as little detail as possible before I start breaking things up and making the smaller details of the object. It's the same process I keep in mind, whether I'm sculpting or painting a picture or doing an illustration. You start with the larger shapes and then slowly refine and get into the details as you go. You can see here I'm sort of doing the edge treatments. I'm beveling those edges and I'm trying to keep them nice and round and chunky. Like I said in the last video, everything in my game is made of balloons. It needs to be sort of soft and inviting. I don't need any sharp edges in my game. So I'm knocking in the keyboard here. I'm using a lot of instancing, so that's how I'm able to manipulate things on one side of the model and it's updating on the other. Sometimes I'm using mirroring, but I think in this case I'm using instancing. I'm trying to keep everything sort of using like the tech from my childhood, so it all sort of fits into like a 90s tech. And you can see I'm simplifying things. Like that's not a real keyboard, right? We're missing some keys there, but I think it's gonna read better from the distance that the camera is in game. That's gonna be about it for the Highpoly model. Now let's move on and make a low res mesh that can actually run in game. And we're gonna build that right on top of the Highpoly we just created. And again, I'm gonna start using instancing here. You'll see I only work on half of it. Yep, there we go. I like to work smart, not hard. And it's okay to have triangles in this mesh. Doesn't matter. A lot of people get a little too hung up on quads and that's fine. But at the end of the day, everything gets knocked down to triangles when it goes in the engine anyway, so don't sweat it. So yeah, this is the process I generally use for props. Sometimes I won't even bother making a high poly and I'll just use like trim sheets and stuff. But you can see here that model is, I think it's like, it's kind of small. I think it's like 200 triangles and the other one was like a couple thousand. Now we can unwrap our model and create some UVs for it. Those are kind of the 2D representation of our 3D model. It makes it possible to apply textures, and I'm bundling a bunch of these props together onto one texture sheet in sort of an insane game of Tetris. I'm trying to fit it all into that box. Now we're ready to bake. That means transferring all of our texture information from those high-res models that we made, that little computer there, to our low-res models that we'll use in game. We're going to use those textures that we're able to bake to create our albedo, our normal map, our metalness, our roughness, our ambient occlusion. Those are all different textures that we can use to describe an object's material. So here with the apple, there we go, we're baking. Now that's the low-res model. It looks a lot like the high-res model, but it's a lot cheaper. We can actually use that in the game. It's a usable mesh. And here you can see all the different props that I made for the school tile set, or at least the pieces that I'm going to use to build those props. And this is what they looked like once I assembled them again in Maya. Here you can see I have a pretty good batch of props. I did end up making a bunch more as I started assembling them in Unity and better understood exactly what I was going to need to make a school tile set. These are those, but here you see those are those low poly models. We just transferred all the textures. I think they look pretty good. Cool, so now we're ready to go back into the engine and start building our school. Levels are put together in my game using a level generator that I created, and that relies on me making a bunch of these tiles. Like I need straight tiles, turns, caps, hubs, a whole bunch of different tiles, right? I usually begin each of those by laying out the walls without any props, like it's a totally empty space except for these walls. And that lets me focus on the flow of the room and sort of make sure that I have the correct number of entrances and exits, because a lot of those tiles can have, more than one of those. Then once I'm happy with the general flow, I'll start layering props. and start trying to tell the story of the space. What was a room used for? What were the people that were last here doing? How can I take an otherwise boring space and make it feel lived in and alive? I think that's really how you can create compelling gameplay spaces. So in this one, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm actually building off of another tile. I like to reuse as much as possible, but I'm still going back to the same thing where I start from the walls and figure out the flow. This looks like a tile that has one entrance and two exits. And I think in this one, I end up building a barricade that forces players to go off the main route, and you have to cut through a classroom to continue. And it brings up some questions, like why did these people build a barricade? Like, were they trying to hide from something or keep something in? It's taking an otherwise empty hallway and, raising some questions that hopefully make it a little bit more interesting of a space. So I go through this process tons of times. I try to do like at least 5 variations for each piece. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but kind of a necessary thing to get enough variety for the level generator so that you don't feel like you're playing the same levels over and over again. Here's what all those props look like in game. It's pretty cool. I actually made a bunch of them into destructibles, so you can do things with them. The character can break them and interact. These water fountains actually start spraying water for a bit. Here, let's poke inside one of these classrooms. As you walk in, you see the black area like fades away. This is a little like sort of science lab. I'll just keep walking up here, breaking everything in our way. And we'll go into another classroom here. There's a cool little globe. I was pretty happy with how that turned out. It actually spins like a globe does. I can mess up the teacher's desk. Got a little flower pot here that shatters, and you can just cause mayhem in the classroom. There's a bunch of different types of classrooms that I have, and yeah, I think this tile set's coming together great so far. This is what the level that we were just running around in looks like from above. You can see here all those tiles are put together to create a level with a bunch of little classrooms. And this is just amazing because I don't have to do this by hand. Now we have 3 tile sets in the game: the neighborhood, the camp, and the school. I've done a lot of work on the game flow, so now you'll have to unlock tile sets before you're able to play them. So for instance, you start off in the neighborhood. In the beginning, the camp and the school will be locked. So you'll need to complete the neighborhood before you can play in the camp. Each has different monsters that get progressively harder. This is the framework of every tile set, more or less. You'll see the player starts at the bottom and has to work their way up, making a bunch of different choices about which path they want to take as they make their way towards the boss at the end of the tile set. They'll run into a variety of different mission types. Right now I have 6. I plan to add more as we go on, and they'll run into shops along the way where they can purchase new weapons and abilities and upgrade those and resurrect fallen teammates. One of the biggest changes actually I've made is if you die along the way, your character's dead. Your whole team dies, then, game over, you've got to try again. Unless you're playing in casual mode, where you can just like it was before, you can always restart the level without losing any progression in that game. If a player beats the boss at the end, they unlock a new kid and potentially a new tile set to play. I added a new walkie-talkie item to the game. And what it does is allow you to bring back fallen teammates. So in this case, we've lost Zoe and we want to bring her back. You'll find these in shops, or sometimes they'll drop in the levels. And if I spend 100 candy, oops, I need to give myself 100 candy. I should really prepare before I do this. If you spend 100 candy, then you can bring her back. And here she is. I did a big push on my weapons to make them feel more interesting and distinct from one another. Especially melee weapons, because before, those were all actually the exact same weapon, just with different art. So starting with the plunger, you'll notice it attacks quickly, but it doesn't do a lot of damage and doesn't attack very far. Next, I have this frying pan to have a slower windup, but do a lot more damage and attack with a longer range. Then I have these fun guys over here, and these ones are really special. So this is a poison fish. It applies a damage over time to the target. Oh yeah, I also added damage numbers that pop up. You can turn those off in the settings though if you don't like those. Next, I have a tennis racket that has a slow effect on it, so it freezes the target and slows them. It doesn't do a lot of damage though. Then I have the fire hammer, which will do a ton of damage, but doesn't last quite as long as the poison. I also did a pass on my weapon bases to make them feel more distinct from one another. On the pistol, it's kind of your standard point and shoot. It does okay damage and has pretty good range. Next, the SMG fires really, really fast. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage. And right now has short range. I think I'm gonna make it a bit longer though, because it looks too short. Next, I have the shotgun. Let's reload that real quick. It does a ton of damage and applies a knockback to your character, but doesn't have a lot of range. The sniper rifle has a really slow rate of fire, has a really long range and pretty good damage. I also did a pass on the progression of these, so as you level them up or upgrade them, their damage and rate of speed and all that stuff will increase. Every projectile type has its own upgrade path in conjunction with how the weapon base is going to upgrade. This one, it fires and then splits into 2. Level 2, it fires, splits into 5. And then so on. It gets crazier. So this is the fully upgraded one. You are doing some crazy damage. Alright, well that was the video. I hope you liked it. And thanks for watching if you made it all the way through. If you're already signed up to beta test, please keep an eye on Steam because I'm going to be kicking out some new builds. I want to get this in your hands as soon as I can and get your thoughts on it. If anyone's interested in beta testing, please join the Discord. I'll try to hit up those guys first if I need more testers. And I'll see you in the next video. Alright, bye.